can't do much better than that. He never asked for perfect. He just asked for all your heart, right? So I'm gonna put a disclaimer on this, okay? Now, remember we said chapter 38 is dealing with sexual morality, and then chapter 39 is how to handle avoiding falling into sexual morality. Now, as I say that, I want you to understand, like, he never asked for perfect. He just asked for all of your heart. So if you've fallen into some type of sin, or you've struggled with this in the past, God can help you overcome these things. The Holy Spirit will empower you. And the teaching is not to make you feel guilty. Because I remember there were times I'd be in the, I was, coming off of 22 years of a bad marriage and going through biblical counseling. I felt like I was getting beat up all the time about all the stuff I did wrong, and I did a lot of stuff that was not good. And I knew that once we started the counseling, and my wife, the counselor didn't ask me anything. He looked right at my wife and she said, "So what's going on?" And my wife went, when he was 17, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be not good," because I was I was already 39. I was like, "We're going to be here a while." So, and I would feel beat up, but you need to remember, like, God is not asking for perfect. He's asking for all your heart. I was constantly moving towards following the cross and following Jesus and dying to self. And that's really what it means when we look at this scripture, is to understand that. And that's the beauty of verse by verse. We don't get to go, okay, well, now let's teach this. This is where we at. We left off in verse 6, so we're in verse 7 this week. I simply entitled this in Genesis 39, and we got to cover verse 6 because there's something in there. But 6, verses 6 through 23. We may not get through all of this tonight. Let me look at my clock so I know how much time I got. I entitled this, How Then Can I Do This Great Wickedness and Sin Against God? How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And that's actually Joseph quote. And I love that. I was like, that's a great title. Can't say that any better, right? So, verse 6, it says, So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Now some of you may have different, depending on we read the New American Standard Bible when we first started, and this is the ESV, and handsome in appearance. That's nothing, I don't struggle with that. But handsome in a form of appearance, right, is understanding, like, David had that problem. He was actually, there's only a couple people that are quoted as being handsome, and that's David, Absalom, and Daniel. And 2 out of the 3 failed into sexual morality. So, just as you think about that, so the temptations and things were thrown at them. You think about Solomon. Solomon had all that knowledge, and he was struggling with sexual morality and not following God. And so it happens. Samson, another one. It's throughout the Bible we see it. In 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 2 and 3, it says, It happened late one afternoon when David arose from the couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, and that he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman. That's where he fell into sin. Right? And one said, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Then Absalom is just a mess. Absalom in 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 22 says, So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines on the sight of all Israel. Like he wanted to be known that he went into his father's concubines. Now Joseph, when we see Joseph, he's a single man. He's in his 20s. He has, it's an understanding, like he would be like any of us that were young and have that sexual drive, but he had something that I know I didn't have. He had purity. At 17, I didn't have that. It was marred at an early age because I was introduced to pornography. Matter of fact, I'll just so you get an understanding of what it is. My stepfather was a hippie. So he thought that, you got to let the kids be kids, and they need to learn however they need to learn. So he had penthouse and he had all those things. And so he decided that the best thing to do was to allow my brothers to have all the centerfolds, and in their room was nothing but the centerfolds of. Now, I was 2 years younger, and I remember walking in that room and feeling like I can't be in here. I didn't know God, but I knew I couldn't be in there. And so this is the type. Now, you think about today, these kids have access to this on the phones. There are kids that are struggling with pornography as early as first grade now. First grade. That's crazy. And so you have this going into your life and into your relationships, but Joseph was prepared because he was smart enough to know that he belonged to God. And he flees from sexual morality. I think the worst thing that men struggle with, and I think being alone. Spending too much time alone. Spending too much time traveling. Spending too much time with idle hands. You should be going to bed tired. You should be bone tired by the time you get to bed. Because if you have kids, you have to be there for them. You're not just supposed to come home and I'm not doing anything. Where's dinner? That's not how that works. You remember we talked about it. You're a servant of the home. And so we have to guard ourselves from sexual temptation. Because if not, Satan will hit you just like Kirk hit his head there. Was that you hitting your head, or that's right? And we think that we get away with it, but God knows. In Numbers chapter 32, verse 23, it says, "But if you will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. There is no such thing as private sin with God." You may be telling yourself to the God in your head that it's okay, He's just going to forgive me, I'm all right. Right? But that's the God in your head that you created. Because if it goes against God's word, you're in sin. And you've sinned against a holy God. Now, important there because we see he's handsome, right? He's smart. He has all the things. And so now he's going to cast eyes, the master's wife's going to cast eyes on her. Verse 7. "And after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, 'Lie with me.'" That word cast in the Hebrew means that she longed for him. She desired him. It means that it was burning, right? She's casting burning as she looks at him. And we don't know why, whether or not her husband was a eunuch, because most that served with the king's staff would have been eunuchs, so we don't know if he was a eunuch or not. We don't know if he was so busy with the king that he didn't give time to his spouse, right? And so, but at the same time, in Egypt at that time, it was open relationships. That stuff happened, just like there's nothing new under the sun, right? We see that stuff happening today. And people think it's going to work out. Just go ask Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith how that's working. They look like they're 70 years old right now. Sin is just beating them up, man. Because they're just living this open marriage and doing all this stuff, and it's like it tears you up. So Potiphar's wife is she's not looking for a relationship. She's got her eyes cast, and she has lust for this young man. In Hebrews 13:4 it says, "Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous." Again, we talked about that, the marriage bed. That is between, and we have to say this today, which is crazy, but a biological male and a biological female. That's what marriage is. And the marriage bed So when you have relations, it's considered worship to the Lord as husband and wife. So if you bring in anything, oh, well, we want to watch pornography. No, that's sexual morality. Even though you're married, it's sexual morality. And so it's supposed to be undefiled. And so we forget that part of it, but that's something we need to think about. 1 Corinthians 6:18 says, flee from sexual morality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexual immoral person sins against his own body. In our culture today, this is the norm, right? This is the norm, to live my truth out, to be able to do what I want to do, to fulfill whatever lust and desires and emotions and feelings that I have. And that's not what God teaches. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 and 28, it says, you have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And I know the women are thinking, oh, I see the men get it. But that's also for you too. So what are you watching, men? Right? What are you looking at? Are you casting your eyes? Is there a desire, a burning desire to look at something? But that goes for the women as well. Do you watch a particular show because, oh, that guy takes his shirt off and he looks good? And you cast your eyes and you have burning desires and you don't miss an episode because you got to see him. What is it, Jack Reacher? The guy's like, I mean, it makes no sense. The guy's like 6'5". Dude's beautiful, man. I'm like, dude, I'm like, that guy, he looks like Brad Pitt, but he's big. And he can sing. On top of it, he can sing. And every time he got his shirt off, I'm like, why is his shirt off? Put his shirt back on. Right? Every chance they can do, his shirt's off. But there's a lot of women casting their eyes. But men, what are you watching? What are you casting your eyes at? Not Jack Reacher. Please don't say that. Because me and you need to talk after service then if it's that. I love what Jesus, as he's talking about adultery, he's actually quoting Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. And he actually, Jesus is actually giving the commandment. He's actually saying just looking is committing adultery. So every time you open up pornography, you're committing adultery. Do you understand the problem with it now? Every time that you open it up and look at it, you're committing adultery. And it just destroys your view of... And unfortunately, back in the 80s, it used to be primarily men that were struggling with it, but now women are struggling with it just as bad. And so we have to be very careful with that. What does Jesus say about this? Matthew chapter 18, verses 7 through 9 says this, woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptation comes, but woe to the one whom the temptation comes. And if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter the life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eyes cause you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into hell of fire. That's very extreme. And one of the things that he says that's in there, he goes, for it is necessary that temptations come. They are going to come. You have to be prepared and ready to deal with them when they come. Let's look at verse 8. It says, but he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me and my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge, he is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you. He's like, I can't do that. And I love what he says next, because you are his wife. That man cared more about that marriage than she did. That says a lot. And then what does he say next? How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He's like, look, everything except you, but he goes, I take my purity very seriously. And I am not going to sin against God. I'm not going to sin against God. And he's like, I know I'm a slave to this house, but this is not part of the deal. That's not happening. And so he had an answer at that moment. And I love what he does. He brings it to who? God. You may not know this God, but my God, the God of Israel, we don't do that. We don't do that. And it's understanding how much, like he understood how bad this sin is to commit adultery. And for us, especially for us that are married, it's like to understand, like, your marriage is supposed to be undefiled. And your marriage bed is to be undefiled. And when you introduce these things, you're introducing sin into the marriage, and it's introducing it, and it's destroying your body, your temple. And so you have to understand, like, you're going against God. You're going against his nature. You're going against his dominion. You're going against his love and his design that he has for marriage. And they love God, but for this reason they hate sin. It's a great evil and a wickedness. And people will say, well, I'm supposed to live my truth. Look, I'm going to tell you straight up. Don't expect somebody ungodly to act godly. But if you know God, you better act godly. You better be asking that same question. How can I do this? How can I bring this wickedness in my home? Right? I'm going to sin. I can't sin against God. Psalm 32 verses 3 and 4, we went over this past weekend. For when I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me, and my strength was dried up as by the heat of the summer. Selah. That is David 12 months into his sin. So he's committed adultery with Bathsheba. He's had the husband killed. And he's 12 months into his sin. And listen to what his body's doing to him. He's like, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. And I love that next part. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. You're in sin, bro. There's a little pressing. Eventually a little pressing. Like, what is it going to take? You keep up with the pornography, eventually you're going to end up into something more dangerous. That's how that works. It's no different than, oh, I'm going to smoke weed. Oh, there's nothing wrong with smoking weed, right? Until you end up with cocaine. Because the weed is making you too tired. And you need something to keep you up, so you go with the cocaine. You always move to different stuff, and that's the same thing with pornography. You're never satisfied with one thing. You move to something else. And before you know it, you're into the meth pornography, where the police come knocking at your door. You got to be careful. Like, he's pressing and he's putting heavy-handed. Like, hey, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for your heart. I love that. Like, that's true. Like, he's asking for you to pursue righteousness and pursue holiness. And when we're tempted, we got to not focus on the thrill. You need to call it what it is. It's sin. Right? It's sin. Focus on the sin, right? It's focus on, like, that's going to destroy me.